everyone.
Shalom.
Welcome to Hebrew Shebrew as we study the Torah portion through the lens of relationships. We are in Leviticus, and so let's dig right in.
So the name of the Torah portion, this video, is going to be Parasha Behar Sinai, which basically means on Mount Sinai. It's Vayikra, Leviticus 25:1 through 26:2. So we're just going to have a couple verses in 26, but it's mainly chapter 25. So digging right in, I'm just going to explain a little bit of what's going on in the chapter. The chapter 25 of Vayikra revolves around the Shemitah, or the 7th year, and the Yovel, or the Jubilee, the 50th year. Now the term Shemitah year, it doesn't actually occur until Moses begins to describe it in Deuteronomy, but it is talking, that is the name that we know this as, is the Shemitah. The term that really comes up the most in this chapter is Yovel, which gets translated as Jubilee. It occurs 14 times just in this chapter alone. That's 14 of 27 occurrences in the whole Tanakh. So this is a heavy theme throughout this chapter. Literally, Yovel, Jubilee, it means a ram's horn. It's translated that way in popular messages like Exodus 19, when it was the giving of the 10 words on Sinai, the ram's horn. Blew long, also in Joshua 6, where we also see it as a ram's horn. The reason that this year is called the year of release or liberty is found in verses 9 through 10 in this chapter. So let's go ahead and read Leviticus 25:9 through 10.
You shall then sound a ram's horn abroad on the 10th day of the 7th month. On the day of atonement, you shall sound a horn all through your land. You shall thus consecrate the 50th year and proclaim a release from the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you, and each of you shall return to his own property, and each of you shall return to his family.
So the 10th day of the 7th month, which we know is Yom HaKippurim, or the Day of Atonements, that's when the shofar was sounded throughout the land to proclaim a release or to proclaim liberty to all the inhabitants. It says that this is a Yovel, it's a jubilee for you, and each of you shall return to your possession and to your clan. The sounding of the ram's horn on that day, on the Day of Atonements, proclaimed that the year of the release, the year of returning, the year of restoration had come. So on the Peshat level, on the basic level, we understand that this is exactly what it's talking about. Yeah. It's talking about the land having its Sabbath rest. It's talking about all things, all debts being wiped out, everybody return to your own possession. Yeah. So it's basically like a huge reset button. Yeah. For the land and also for the economy. Yeah. But what we want to look at is, what can we learn about our relationships from this concept of the Jubilee year?
Yeah, remember, we're talking about relationships. We're talking about relationships within people that are around us, like our family, our friends, our kids. And then we're also talking about our coworkers that we work with and just the general public of people that we are around. So how can this relate to us now within those relationships that we have?
Yeah. And a way that we can look at it is, as I said before, it's like a reset button. Yeah. It's a device that's used to erase or to reset everything that had happened in the previous 49 years. And to put it in terms we can understand, it will help, return things to factory settings.
Yeah. So if you think about it, you have your cell phone, and a lot of us know how to go ahead and turn it off, reset it, refix it back to factory, where you delete all the apps, you delete all your games that you have on there, you delete all your pictures and all your movies and everything else that you have on there, and you're able to go ahead and reset. Sometimes you need a reset within your relationship. Sometimes you need a reset within a child doing something completely wrong, and you're like, reset, redo, let's try this again. You know, it's the same thing when you're married. It's like, okay, let's have a reset here. Like, we've been on the wrong page for a week, a month, a year, whatever it is. We need to have a reset. We need to have a conversation. We need to sit down. We need to refigure this out. That's when you go back to your ketubah. That's when you go back to your wedding vows and been like, hey, this is what I committed to you many years ago, or maybe it was just 6 months ago you got married and you're having to do a reset again. But go back to that commitment and be like, okay, let's do a reset here. Where did we go wrong? How can we go ahead and fix this and move forward through it? It's not like you're forgetting the past. It's not like you are forgetting, you know, all the mistakes that have happened. Well, you should, but you need to have forgiveness, you know, towards that person. But you also need to go ahead and let them have a reset in their life too. You know, God's working in them just like God's working in you. So have that reset time frame.
Sticking with, you know, the idea of the phone or the computer, the reason that things start to not work right, things start to slow down, is because a file got corrupted, you know, something of that nature. So the computer, the phone, is struggling to function in its purpose because something got in the way. There was misunderstanding, basically, to keep with the relationship picture. You know, so somewhere in your relationship, a file's been corrupted. Maybe we can look at it as a behavior. A behavior showed up, you know, a corrupted behavior, a corrupted way of thinking, a corrupted way of speaking, you know, some of those things. And you just have to, as Sarah said, it's time to go back to the factory settings, or, you know, look back at the reason why you fell in love in the first place. If we're just talking about, you know, husband and wife. Now there's a lot more that we can look at here, you know, starting, you know, in our relationship with Elohim. Every week we get a reset button. It's called the Sabbath. So that's a chance every week to, whatever happened, you know, in our relationship for the past 6 days on Sabbath, it's like hitting the reset button, and we get to reconnect with him. Also with our family and our friends, we can, you know, use that time also to hit the reset button. Let's reconnect. Let's, you know, put behind us these things that happened in the last 6 days, and let's just reset and reconnect. So, I mean, we have the Sabbath, especially that for Elohim, and for also his appointed times. You know, the times during Passover and Pentecost and trumpets and atonement and Sukkot, especially during atonement. That's when this actual, you know, term of the Jubilee, that's when it was actually proclaimed. And that is like a huge reset in the relationship between Adonai and his people. It's when we're resetting it all and getting that fresh start.
Exactly.
But I mean, we can also, you know, look at an idea with our spouses of having weekly, monthly, impromptu check-ins. A check-in is basically what we had hinted at earlier. Something's gone wrong. There's a behavior, there's a word, there's bruised feelings. Something has gone wrong, and you're not really understanding each other because you love each other. But for whatever reason, you're not understanding what the other person is feeling. You're not understanding, you know, what they're thinking in their heads, and what some of your behaviors is causing for them, or it's vice versa. They're not understanding what their behaviors are causing for you. So why you need these check-ins is, you know, like an opportunity to actually sit down and speak and listen.
It takes both. You know, you both have to go ahead and sit down. If you need to, use a talking stick. You know, if it gets to the point of the relationship where you're interrupting each other and you're not able to go ahead and hear, you need to practice good communication and sit down, have a talking stick, and be like, okay, I need you to go ahead and talk. And then the other person needs to go ahead and listen and rephrase back to them and be like, okay, I think this is what you said. Is this what you said? Okay, good. Now we're on the same page. Let me go ahead and tell you where I am at, you know, and vice versa. So you go back and forth within that, and that's going to go ahead and help you get back on that same page. And it might feel awkward in the beginning. And sometimes you might need help. Sometimes you might need your pastor to sit down with you to go ahead and have these conversations. Sometimes you might need a a friend or somebody who you're able to be accountable to sit down and have these conversations if you feel like you're not able to go ahead and do that within your relationship partner. It's the same thing with your kids too. You need to have that reset time and be like, okay, let's sit down. Let's go over the ground rules again. Let's go over what's expected of everybody. You know, it's like when you get a new puppy, it's like, okay, that new puppy is going to need to go ahead and have food and water and go for little walks. Well, that's what you have to go ahead and do every single day. Sometimes you have to have a reset within those relationships as well and reset those expectations, because if not, that puppy's going to go all over your house. And that's not going to be good.
Not good at all.
No.
I was flipping here because I wasn't, exactly planning to go here, but it's going to be First Peter, Peter's letter. I'm not going to go into everything that he's saying in this because it would take a lot longer than this video would allow. But in 1 Peter 3, in verse 7, it just starts out this way. It says, "In the same way, husbands, live understandingly together with your wife." And it goes into a lot of other things. But the thing is, and this goes both ways, you need to take the time to speak and the other to listen intently so that there is understanding. And that's why, Sarah was specifically saying, repeat back to the other person, like make sure that you are understanding what they're saying.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the main issues that we have with our relationships is we don't understand where the other person is.
Yeah.
And because we love the other person, we started this relationship because of love, because of mutual interest, whether it's with Elohim, with your spouse, with your friends. There's, the beginning of the relationship is this love, and you like them and you like being around them. Mm-hmm. So if you actually understand them, you're going to see what your behavior is doing, and you're going to want to fix that.
Yeah.
Because you love them.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the big keys is just making sure you do this process so that you can have the understanding. Because once we get to the point of understanding, then it's a lot easier for us to, I don't want to do that to you because I love you.
Yeah. And when you're in a beginning relationship with somebody and you're starting to court them, you're talking a lot. One of the great questions to be able to ask is, how was communication demonstrated to you? How did your parents communicate with each other and with you? Was there a lot of screaming involved? Was there a lot of questions? And good questions, not just drilling questions. You don't want to feel like you've been interrogated, but you want to go ahead and have good probing questions to be able to know, how did communication happen? Did the family sit down at a dinner table and talk at dinner? Or was it a yelling match all the time? Did you have good conversations with your parents, and good story time with your parents? Or was it you just go off to your room and go do your own thing and you never get to have any kind of family time? Like, what did that look like while you were growing up, in your early years, in your teen years, and then as an adult, as you continue to develop? How are you relating to that now? How do you communicate with your friends? Do you get mad? Do you get upset? Do you have a reset with your friends as well? Those are all good things to be able to figure out when you're in that beginning stage of a relationship, or even say like you've been dating for 6 months or a year and you want to be able to get to that next level. Start digging deeper and asking those deeper questions so you're able to know, if you do get married to somebody, this is what communication is going to look like when we're married. Because if it's bad in the beginning, probably not going to get good at the end. You're going to have to work on it and strive to go ahead and do that. Definitely. And both people have to be open to it.
Definitely. We're going to move a little bit further now, and we're just going to read verse 14. But obviously, verse 14 is continuing to build on the idea of the Yovel, of the Jubilees. So it's going to be talking about, these are the things that we're doing as you're hitting the reset button.
So 14, if you make a sale, moreover, to your friend, or buy from your friend's hand, you shall not wrong one another.
Shall not wrong one another. There's a few different ways that you can translate this word in the Hebrew. Wrong one another, exploit one another, oppress one another. But the idea here is it's talking to the person who is actually going to make the purchase, because the other person has come to the point where they need to sell a portion of their land or all of their land, and you're going to buy it according to the number of crops until the Jubilee. Things as we keep on reading, that's the way it's going to go. But the thing we wanted to look at here is the idea of exploiting, manipulating, taking advantage. And it's, the person who is doing that is obviously they're in an authoritative position, usually in a relationship. Now, this is not a hard, like this is the way it is always, but it may just be in certain scenarios, but someone is in the authority position and someone is in the submissive or the lower position. So really what we want to look at is in your relationships, when you're in the authority position, do not exploit, do not take advantage, do not manipulate, do not wrong the person who is down here. They're already having a tough enough time because they're in the position that would require them to reach out and need that help. But when the help that they do receive is a help that is manipulating and taking advantage of them, that's definitely something that's being spoken to here. And we never want to be the kind, because we are the image bearers of Elohim. So we don't want to be the kind who are manipulators, who take advantage, who exploit. We can look at this and see what's the opposite. If I'm not supposed to exploit, if I'm not supposed to take advantage, if I'm not supposed to manipulate, then how is it that I should treat the person that is in the lower position than me? And the best words that I can think of is going to be justice, righteousness, and kindness. Those are the things. Loving kindness maybe is a better one to throw on there, because those are the things that continue. Also mercy, compassion. Those are the ways that our Elohim treats us. And without a shadow of a doubt, he is always in the higher position. But the ones that are under him and are supposed to be submitted to him, he treats them justly. He treats them compassionately. He treats them with loving kindness. He deals with them righteously. So if we're to be his image bearers and imitating how he treats people, then that's how we need to treat people.
I mean, all of us have worked for somebody, for a boss or a manager, supervisor, who was either good and kind, or who ruled terribly and was evil, and it's a matter of who do you respect more? You respect the one who is good and kind. Yes, they might be stern. Yes, they're going to give you feedback and tell you, hey, you could do this a little bit better. But you're going to respect them a little bit more because they're showing you loving kindness. They're showing you kindness within that, versus the one who is doing it evilness and just doing it in a wrong way. You're not going to respect that person. You're not going to like them very much at all. You're not going to want to go ahead and do what they're asking you to do because they're not doing it in that kindness. So kindness goes a long way, and just being kind to fellow people, it just goes a long way in this world.
It does. And we're just going to read a few more verses that are continue to talk about this throughout the rest of the chapter. I'm going to go to 42 and 43. It says, and this is Adonai speaking, for they are my servants, speaking of Israel, whom I brought out of the land of Egypt. They are not sold as slaves. Do not rule over him with harshness, but you shall fear your Elohim. Then also in verse 46, you shall take them as an inheritance for your children after you, to inherit them as a possession. They are your slaves for all time. But over your brothers, the children of Israel, you do not rule with harshness one over another. And then further to 53 and 55, it says, he is with him as a yearly hired servant, speaking of the one that you have brought into your home because they're in a difficult spot, and you are helping them to get back on their feet. That person is with you as a yearly hired servant, and he does not rule with harshness over him before your eyes. forgive me, this is actually if it is someone who is not of Israel and they sell themselves over to Israel. So you're to make sure that even if someone is in that position, they are not ruling over your brother with harshness before your eyes. And if they're not redeemed in those years, then he shall be released in the year of Jubilee, he and his children with him, because the children of Israel are servants to me. This is Adonai speaking. They are my servants whom I brought out of the land of Egypt. I am Adonai, your Elohim. So it's this idea of, again, like you don't rule over them with harshness. Well, what's the opposite of that? That's going to be kindness. Yeah. The doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. Yeah. Also, from another sage back in the first century, he said, what is hateful to you, do not do to another. We can take all these kind of together and just kind of define, what does this mean to rule over somebody with harshness? Yeah. If we want to look at the concept of harshness, we can look at Pharaoh and the way he ruled over Israel with harshness. So I mean, obviously they were just coming out from under that whole struggle, and we don't want to go from one master who treats you with harshness to another who treats you with harshness. But the big takeaway from this is one of the main reasons is because because Adonai says, they are my servants. Yeah. And I'm going to teach you and instruct you how you're to rule over my servants. Yeah.
Yeah. So think about the people that you work with. Think about the people that you hire to go ahead and come and help and do things in your home. Are you treating them with kindness, or are you being rude and obnoxious and saying inappropriate things? That's not treating somebody with kindness. That's not treating them like a child of the king, and if you're being treated that way, you need to stand up for yourself and say, this isn't happening. I'm a child of the king. I'm not going to be treated this way. This is not good, and this has got to stop. Speak up for yourself and go ahead and say something.
I was just thinking of, some of the great instructions we have here in Ephesians, and this one idea, it's talking about parents to children, and it says, fathers, do not provoke your children, but bring them up in the instruction and admonition of the master. And it does continue. There's a great chapter. It talks about, husbands and wives, servants, masters, in verse 9, masters do the same to them, refrain from threatening, knowing that your own master also is in the heavens and there is no partiality with him. So it's just the idea of treating people, as we learn from Elohim in his words and his instructions. That's the way it's not just, a kind of a book study, but the things that we see him doing and the ways that we see him treating people, that's what we want to imitate. Compassion, loving kindness, justice, righteousness. Those are the things that we want to imitate in our relationships, whether it's the relationship with him where we're on the receiving end of that from him, or whether it's in our marriage relationship, or in our parental children relationship, whether in our employer relationship, in our assemblies where there are, structure and there's people who are assigned certain roles, those folks are to, have this same mindset. If you are in a position of responsibility and authority, and you have to lead the sheep, as it were, then you don't want to provoke them. You don't want to do the thing that's threatening, things of that nature. There's a better way.
Yeah, there is, and when you are looking at a potential spouse, it's good to go ahead and in a way get references, and be like, ask the community there that they're a part of, and be like, hey, can you tell me a little bit about this person? Good, bad, everything, Same thing with the family members, find out from the parents, how are they? How were they as a child? How are they now? Ask the siblings, and hopefully people are going to tell you the truth in regards to, well, this person has an anger problem, or this person's lazy, or this person's a mess. You want to find out some of those things to be able to know, okay, what are you walking into? What does your life look like? And if you're able to be around them, at an extended time, to be able to really see where they live, how they interact with people, even going out to a restaurant, you can see how they interact with a waitress at times, a complete stranger who is serving them some food. How do they react? What about in the car with traffic? I know I am guilty of not being the best person in traffic. But it's like, how do you interact in those little encounters in a way? That is going to go ahead and say a lot about that person's character.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we've got for this time.
Awesome.
There's a lot of other things that we could mine out from this particular chapter. There's definitely the thing at the end about the relationship with Elohim, speaking against adultery, speaking of, to guard his set apart times and his set apart places.
Yeah.
We didn't even talk about, the Goel, the close redeemer. So that is in this chapter. So we encourage you to look into these things and see what you can find to improve and strengthen the relationships you have with Elohim, with your spouse, with your future spouse, with your family, your friends, your coworkers. Definitely looking through the lens of relationship at these instructions and using all of the wealth of knowledge that our scriptures have to build your relationships, to grow them, to maintain them. Elohim is all about relationship.
Yes.
And his book has much, much wisdom about how to have successful relationships. That's what we want for you.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe so you can get notified when we have new videos coming out. And we hope to see you next time. Bye.
Shalom.